I'm on my learner's permit after dark.
Welcome to Culture Screen, where we analyze culture. In this episode, we're summarizing the 18th episode from Season 6 of the Sopranos series titled Kennedy and Heidi. The episode first aired on May 13th, 2007. In the beginning, we see one of Tony's garbage trucks dumping garbage containing asbestos off at Barone Sanitation. Phil Leotardo refuses to allow Tony to continue to do so while keeping all of the money he is making off the illegal dumping of asbestos to himself. Phil says that he will allow Tony to continue dumping the asbestos, but only if he gives him 25% of his earnings. Tony refuses and walks away. As Tony and Christopher are driving away, Christopher recommends Tony should pay Phil the 25% because life is too short, but Tony ends up dumping the asbestos into a lake instead. As Chris and Tony are driving down the road, we see Christopher is obviously high. Chris fidgets with the radio system non-stop and continues to be distracted. Tony stares at Chris and notices that he is in fact high. Due to Chris's negligence, he drives off into the lane of oncoming traffic and almost crashes head-on into two women named Kennedy and Heidi. As a way of avoiding a direct impact, Christopher turns sharply, but this results in their car tumbling and spinning out of control off the side of the road. Christopher was not wearing a seatbelt, but Tony was. As a result of this, Tony gets out of the accident nearly unscathed. Before Tony gets out to help Chris, he looks back and sees the baby car seat destroyed and a tree branch impaling the seat itself. Christopher tells Tony that he should call a cab for him instead of an ambulance because he would surely fail any sort of drug test that would result from an investigation or insurance claim. Here, Chris proves again to Tony just how unreliable he is. As Chris is bleeding from his mouth, Tony takes out his cell phone and proceeds to dial 911. However, Tony stops as this is an opportunity for him to finally get rid of Christopher. Tony closes his cell phone and instead chooses to pinch Chris's nose so he cannot breathe, and he ends up taking Chris's life. After he is sure Chris is dead, he calls 911. In the following scene, Tony and Chris arrive at the hospital. When Tony asks about Chris, the hospital staff members tell Tony that Chris has passed away. Tony looks to his left and sees a body bag with Chris's clothes next to it. Tony borrows the cell phone of a nurse and he calls Carmela. He shares that he is okay, but Christopher has passed away. Carmela is shocked to hear the news and she heads to the hospital immediately. Since Tony is not severely injured, he heads home and the DeMeo guys pay him a visit. Out of all the guys, Paulie feels bad about having fought with Christopher for so long about money and constantly teasing him about not drinking or doing drugs. Christopher's mother is also seen sobbing and drinking more than she should. Kelly is of course devastated, and Al, Kelly's father, is extremely upset when he finds out Christopher had cocaine in his system. Later on that night, Tony has a dream where he is meeting with Dr. Melfi. In this dream, he shares that although he saw Christopher as a son, he feels relieved now that he is gone. Tony describes Chris as one of his greatest mistakes because Christopher was someone he simply could not trust anymore. Tony goes on to explain that now he no longer has to deal with Chris's mistakes. Then he confesses to multiple murders to Melfi before finally waking up. Later on, Tony has an actual meeting with Dr. Melfi where she repeatedly asks him how he is dealing with Christopher dying. Tony explains that he does feel a sense of relief and feels upset that he has to put on a show for losing Christopher. He shares that Chris's mother was never really apparent to him and that he was the one who had to walk him through every difficult situation he ever had in life. At the end of their meeting, Tony says that he just does not feel anything for losing Christopher and that he now has to be around family members who are actually sad while he doesn't feel anything at all. In this scene, we see yet again that Tony continues to care only for himself and his own personal gain. He does not care about family and is incapable of truly empathizing with them even in their darkest moments. Since Tony's last visit to the hospital, he told Melfi that going forward, every day would be a gift and that he would take things easier. We see, however, that his actions continue to prove otherwise.
How are you handling all this?
Remember, I am summarizing this entire series, as well as other popular works of literature, movies, and TV shows as well. Subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss the next episode or series. Let me know what you'd like me to summarize in the comments section below. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter for additional content, visit our merch store, and support us on Patreon if you can. Doing this helps my channel out tremendously. I thank you for your support.
Let me tell you something. I've seen friends die before.
When Tony and Carmela arrive at Christopher's funeral, we see how sad everyone is. As Kelly approaches Chris's casket, she breaks down, crying just like Christopher's mother. Tony is again upset at this, and he is agitated at having to put on a show for everyone to watch. Carmela reminds Tony that they have to stop by Paulie's mother's funeral in Nucci. Paulie also lost his mother recently, and when they arrive, they notice Paulie's funeral arrangement is completely empty compared to Christopher's. Paulie is upset and says that he will never forget how his own crew members did this to him. Paulie almost sounds like he is about to swear to take revenge when Tony cuts him off and reminds him that a funeral is not the time nor place to be upset at others, and he thanks Tony for showing up. In another scene, we see Tony is fed up of being around his family as they continue to mourn Christopher. Tony ends up taking a solo vacation trip to Las Vegas, and he stops by to visit Chris's old guma, Sonia. He tells her that Chris passed away, and she is also shocked but happy that at least he left behind the daughter. As Tony is getting ready to leave, Sonia asks him if he has any plans for the trip, to which Tony replies that he is taking it day by day and that he does not know how long he will stay in Vegas. This entire sequence is made to remind the viewer of the dream Tony had as Kevin Finnerty. Tony checks in without a return date. When Tony meets back up with Sonia, they sleep together and do drugs. When Tony heads to the casino floor, he stops dead in his tracks when he sees a depiction of Satan glowing at one of the gambling sections, symbolizing that after the Kevin Finnerty coma dream, Tony has chosen to abide in hell rather than heaven. As Tony heads to the roulette table, he is still high on the drugs he consumed with Sonia, and he begins placing bets and winning big. Tony wins 3 times consecutively. He wins so much money that he falls back onto the floor laughing and celebrating his victory. At one instance, he even mentions that Christopher is dead, as if Chris's death had lifted the bad luck he was having at gambling and life all along. The scene ends with Tony laughing and celebrating that he has finally won. As we catch back up with AJ, we see him hanging out with his friends. When Jason arrives, he opens his door to exit the car and causes an African student to fall off his bike. When the student stands up to defend himself, the entire crew except AJ proceeds to beat down the Somalian student as they call him names. At AJ's next meeting with his psychiatrist, we see he is devastated. AJ does not understand why the world is such a cruel, horrible place. AJ asks in the end, why can't we all just get along? AJ's experience proves to us that Tony is not how he is because of his genetics, but rather because of his choices. Although AJ shares the same genetics as Tony, he chooses to see the humanity in individuals, whereas Tony and the Jasons choose not to. Tony chooses to care very little of the world and the people who reside in it, including his own nephew Christopher, who he killed, while AJ cares about others. We see Tony ordering his sanitation workers dump asbestos into a nearby lake, polluting his entire community and not caring about who he hurts. In the final scene, Tony is watching a sunset with Sonia when he sees a flash in the sun similar to the flash he saw as Kevin Finnerty in his dream. When he sees the flash, Tony tears up and yells, "I get it." This scene is reminiscent of Tony's many other experiences with death. Tony has these fleeting moments where he feels like he is stumbling across some deep answer or level of understanding, when in reality he is who he will always be, a selfish criminal who murdered his own protege, is unfaithful to his wife, and is a lousy businessman. The viewer is left thinking that Tony has suddenly reached a deeper level of understanding, when in reality he will never get it, because he continues to be the same Tony Soprano we've known all along.
I get it!
That was episode number 83, titled Kennedy and Heidi. To watch the next or previous episode summary, click on the link in the description or at the end of this video. In the description, you will also find additional links for supporting our channel. I'll see you on the next episode. Goodbye.
Allow me to express my condolences regarding your nephew.
We upload new videos every week, so subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the like button as well. Click the notification bell to be notified of when we upload these videos. See you on the next episode of Culture Screen.